The candles are already burning low when I rise. The Louvre never truly sleeps, it just murmurs. Footsteps fade down endless corridors, the scent of ink and musk thick in the air. Somewhere beyond these walls, Paris is restless, but in here, everything moves like a dream laced with venom. I touch the silver locket at my throat. Inside it, not a portrait, but a pinch of antidote. You never know when it might be needed. Not in this court, not under Catherine de Medici. If you find yourself drawn to these quiet hours of danger and silk, I'd be grateful if you'd like and subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing who's out there, keeping me company while history breathes again in the dark. We're stepping back into the time of Renaissance France, where a widow ruled through charm and fear, and every alliance was sealed not just with a kiss, but with the faint taste of bitter almonds. Tonight, we walk through her world, a palace of beauty, betrayal, and perfume strong enough to mask the scent of death. The bells breathe before dawn, their bronze throats stirring the narrow streets long before the sun dares the rooftops. You lie still beneath a thin sheet, listening to them shiver through the air, each note carrying dust and memory. Florence never wakes gently. It exhales heat, incense, and rumor, even in the quiet hours before light. You feel that pulse under the stone floor, a restless heartbeat that belongs to no one and everyone. Your room is a small square of shadows, walls painted the color of forgotten flowers. The linen itches against your neck. It smells faintly of soap and damp iron. Somewhere below, a servant whispers a prayer she doesn't believe. The scent of last night's candle still lingers, wax cooling into the shape of tears. You count your breaths and tell yourself you are safe. But Florence does not raise safe children. It raises survivors. When the sisters come, their footsteps fall like secrets. One tightens your laces too hard, perhaps on purpose, perhaps by habit. Her fingers are cold, her eyes quick. She calls you Caterina, in a voice careful not to tremble, as if the name itself might summon your family's ghosts. Medici. You can feel the word ripple through her like a chill, the syllables heavy with debts and disappearances. You are too young to know why people glance away when you enter a room, but old enough to feel it. In the garden, the world pretends to be kind. Olive trees twist toward the morning, silver leaves turning their soft bellies to the Sunday. You kneel in the dirt, tracing patterns in the soil, and wonder if your parents once stood here, breathing the same air. The sisters say they are with God. Florence says they are with history. And history, you have already learned, does not love its daughters. At lessons, you repeat Latin like a charm. Your tutor smells of parchment and suspicion. He watches you too closely, as though knowledge was something dangerous in a child's mouth. Between conjugations, you study him back. You learn more from his silences than his words, how power hides in tone, in posture, in what is not said. Every man here teaches you something, though not always what he means to. When dusk bleeds through the shutters, the city hums again. You press your palms against the cool wall and feel Florence moving, its merchants arguing, its lovers whispering, its knives being sharpened somewhere behind closed doors. The air tastes of bread, smoke, and distant laughter. You do not yet know the shape of ambition, but you recognize its scent. It smells like survival. Later, as the bells call for evening prayer, you climb the narrow stairs to the tower. From there, the city spreads beneath you like a living tapestry, gold, red, and veined with the river's dark green thread. Towers stretch like fingers toward the clouds. The wind wraps around you, carrying words you can't quite hear but somehow understand. You belong to this place, and it to you. You stay there long after the sisters' lantern disappears below. The stars rise, faint and few, and you whisper a vow into the night, one the city itself seems to listen for. You will not be forgotten. Florence may have birthed you in loss, but it has given you its hunger, that beautiful, merciless thing that teaches even small hands to hold power. The convent is a kingdom of whispers. Every footstep seems to echo for miles, swallowed and returned by stone that remembers everything. You walk the corridors in silence, trailing a hand along the cool wall, tracing cracks that twist like veins. The sisters move past you like ghosts in grey, their veils stirring faintly in the draught, their faces unreadable. They live by rhythm here, prayer, labour, stillness, and you are learning to move inside their pattern, though it never quite fits. Morning light slants through the cloister arches, turning the flagstones pale gold. Dust drifts in the beams, slow as snowfall. Somewhere, water trickles into a basin, and the sound becomes the pulse of the hour. You sit on a bench near the herb garden where rosemary and sage reach for the sun, their scent clean, sharp, alive. The air tastes of mint and quiet devotion. You could almost believe this place is peaceful, if not for the eyes. Always watching, always measuring. You have learned that silence here is never empty. It is full of listening. The older nuns know your lineage. They speak of Florence the way a priest speaks of sin. Sometimes you catch them glancing at the small ring on your finger, the only thing you have left from your mother. They do not scold you for wearing it, but their looks are sermons in themselves. Wealth is temptation, beauty is danger, ambition is damnation. These lessons are not written in books, they are written in glances, in the deliberate scrape of a chair when you enter the room. At meals, the refectory fills with the sound of spoons, not voices. You eat slowly, tasting the plainness, bread, broth, water, and wondering if virtue always has to taste like nothing. You lower your gaze, because eyes lifted too high invite questions. Yet, in the reflection of the silver jug, you see your own face and think how strange it is to feel both watched and invisible at once. In the afternoons, you're sent to the scriptorium, where time moves differently. The air smells of ink, wax, and patience. Rows of women bend over parchment, their hands steady, their backs curved like question marks. The scratching of quills sounds like rain. You copy Latin phrases you barely understand, but the shapes of the letters fascinate you, how every word seems to have weight and consequence. You imagine them as spells, these black trails of meaning, capable of turning truth into rumor or ruin. Sometimes, through the high window, you glimpse the city beyond the walls, a slice of sky, a slant of roof, the faint sound of a bell from another world. You think about the life waiting out there, all color and movement, and you feel a flicker in your chest that is not quite longing but something close. Florence calls to you even here, its breath pressing against the cloister like wind against a shutter. When night falls, the prayers rise. The chapel glows with candlelight, the air heavy with incense and unspoken fear. You kneel with the others, your lips moving with the words they have given you, though your heart murmurs its own. The sound of so many voices blending into one should be holy, but to you it feels like surrender. You look up at the crucifix gold gleaming in the dim and wonder if faith is meant to comfort or to cage. The bell rings again, long and low. The sisters file out, their shadows stretching along the floor like ribbons. You stay behind a moment longer, breathing the smoke and silence. You are learning to hide in plain sight, to wear obedience as armor, to let the world believe you are harmless. The convent teaches prayer, but Florence is teaching patience. And in that patience, something in you is quietly beginning to sharpen. Rain presses against the chapel roof, slow and steady as a heartbeat. You sit in the pew farthest from the altar, where the light fades before it reaches the floor. The air is damp, carrying the faint scent of old stone, beeswax, and decay. The sisters whisper their prayers, words shaped like smoke. You move your lips with them, but your thoughts wander beyond the cloister to a name that weighs more than the prayers ever could. Medici. It echoes even when no one dares speak it. You are 8 when you first realize what the name means: power without protection, gold without safety. Florence remembers every coin your family ever lent, every favor traded, every throat cut clean in the name of progress. The nuns never say it, but their silence hums with memory. You are both relic and warning. They teach you to bow your head, and not to meet the eyes of visitors, men who come from Rome, carrying letters sealed in crimson wax. They arrive smelling of travel and dust and decisions already made. When one of them speaks your name aloud, the syllables seem to hang in the air like incense. He studies you the way one studies an inheritance to be kept, sold, or discarded. You hold his gaze for a moment longer than is polite. It is the first lesson you learn about men. They look at girls like you the way generals look at maps. The convent grows smaller each day. Its stone walls press closer, the shadows thicker, the air slower. You have outgrown your lessons in scripture and sewing, and so they give you Latin books copied in the scriptorium. The words become your escape, the parchment soft beneath your fingers. You read of queens, of gods, of empires that fell from pride, and you begin to wonder which one you will become. In the evenings you walk the cloister with a candle cupped in both hands. The flame trembles never still. You think of your mother, the woman you never knew, whose face lives only in the memory of others. Some say she was kind, others say she was cunning. The truth, you decide, must be both. Power does not grow in a single shape. It shifts, it bends, it waits. Once you overhear the abbess speaking behind a half-closed door. "The child carries a curse and a crown," she says, "and one day both will come to collect." You do not breathe until the footsteps fade. That night, you dream of a city swallowed by smoke and bells tolling for no one in particular. When morning comes, you rise before the others. The rain has stopped, and the courtyard gleams with puddles that reflect the grey sky like fragments of glass. You kneel to touch one, tracing ripples with your fingertip until the reflection breaks apart. For the first time, you understand that survival is not obedience, it is adaptation. You look toward the horizon where the city waits, its domes and towers blurred by mist. Somewhere beyond those walls, your name is being written again in ledgers, in letters, in alliances you cannot yet imagine. You are still the orphan, but no longer helpless. Florence may hold your past, but it will not decide your future. You stand, brushing dust from your knees, and the sound of the bells returns not gentle this time, but expectant, as if the city itself is calling your name. The carriage creaks like an old confession, every turn of its wheels punctuated by the soft jingle of reins and the rustle of silk skirts. You sit straight-backed, gloved hands folded in your lap, eyes fixed on the narrow window. Outside, Rome rises in layers of marble and shadow. The air smells of incense, horse sweat, and burning olive oil, a scent that clings to the skin, that marks all who come to serve its power. You are no longer just a child of Florence. You are property of the papacy now. The men who fetched you from the convent spoke of destiny with polished tongues. They called you a niece of the Pope, a ward of the Church, a treasure of God's favor. But treasures are meant to be spent. You learned that early. In the echoing halls of the Vatican, everything gleams, and everything is for sale: loyalty, silence, bloodlines. Even girls with famous names. You are led through corridors vast as cathedrals, their walls painted with angels that look down in judgment or boredom. Servants bow, guards stare. When you are presented to His Holiness, you lower your gaze as the sisters taught you, though the marble floor throws his reflection back at you, white robes, jeweled cross, the faintest tremor in his old hands. He blesses you with words that sound rehearsed, and when he calls you child, the room tilts slightly. The Pope has many children, though none call him father aloud. They say you are to be educated as a lady of refinement. You will learn music, diplomacy, languages. You will dine at tables where the fate of nations is traded between courses. It sounds noble. It is not. You understand soon enough. Your worth lies not in your mind or your manners, but in your name. You are a Medici, and for the men in red caps, that means leverage. In the gardens of the Vatican, the air hums with gossip disguised as prayer. Cardinals stroll beneath cypress trees, their voices low but urgent. You listen when they think you cannot understand. France, alliances, dowries, wars, their words fall like coins. They speak of you sometimes, a suitable match for France, a bridge between kingdoms, a useful girl. Useful. The word slides beneath your skin like a cold blade. At night, you walk alone through your chambers. Candles gutter in tall iron sconces, their smoke curling like thoughts you dare not say. You touch the heavy curtains, the embroidered cushions, the polished crucifix, all beautiful, all meaningless. A gift is never just a gift here. Every kindness hides a contract. You are learning to smile as you were taught, gently, modestly, without revealing anything at all. One morning, a new tutor arrives from Florence. His accent sounds like home, his gaze not at all. He teaches you court etiquette, the art of saying everything while meaning nothing. A queen, he says softly, is only as safe as her secrets. You pretend to take notes. In truth, you are memorizing him, the small pause before he lies, the way he glances toward the door before speaking of power. You are still too young to see the full game, but you feel its weight pressing in. Marriage contracts drafted before you can even sign your own name. Alliances built on your body, your blood, your future. The church prays over your soul while bargaining for your hand. When night falls, you kneel by your window, the city below, glowing like 1,000 hidden embers. You whisper a prayer that sounds more like a warning. May I never be what they think I am. The wind shifts, carrying the faint toll of distant bells, not calling to prayer this time, but to purpose. You rise slowly, steadying your breath. The game has begun, and though they think you a pawn, you are already learning how to move. The bells of Rome toll as though the city itself were exhaling. The sky is white with heat, the kind that makes even marble smell of dust. You stand still while servants pin gold thread into your hair, their fingers trembling, their eyes full of curiosity and pity. They know what this means, the end of one life and the beginning of another. You are 14, a girl carved into a promise. Soon you will be sent north to become the Duchess of Orleans, bride to a French prince you have never met. They drape you in satin, layer upon layer, until you can barely breathe. Mirrors line the walls, and in each one, a different version of you stares back. Child, pawn, ornament. You don't yet know which face will survive the journey. When the final clasp closes at your throat, you feel it like a lock clicking shut. The papal court gathers to see you off. Cardinals smile like men admiring a fine painting. Your uncle, the Pope, blesses you with a hand that shakes under its rings. You will bring peace, he says, though his voice sounds more like command than comfort. Peace. The word has many meanings. In this world, it often means obedience. The procession through the city is a spectacle, banners unfurling, horses pouring the cobblestones, crowds pressing close for a glimpse of the Medici bride. You look straight ahead, as you were taught, though you can feel the eyes upon you. Rome's gossip, Rome's envy, Rome's doubts. You've heard the whispers. She is a banker's daughter, not noble blood. France will never accept her. But Florence runs through your veins, and Florence never asks for acceptance, only opportunity. As the carriage rolls north, the landscape shifts from sunburnt hills to the cool greens of the French countryside. The air grows softer, carrying the scent of rain and pine. At night, when the servants sleep, you lift the curtain and watch the moon trace silver across the road. You think of your parents, of their sudden deaths, of the silence that followed. You wonder if they would recognize you now, wrapped in gold and duty. Days later, Marseille rises before you like a dream, a city of salt and smoke, where the sea meets the stone walls of a waiting kingdom. The harbor is alive with color, silks snapping in the wind, musicians tuning lutes, priests blessing the ships. You are led to the great cathedral where your future husband waits. Henri of Orleans, pale, tall, handsome, and entirely disinterested. He bows stiffly, his lips brushing your hand as though touching a relic. Behind him stands another woman, older, graceful, eyes steady as steel. Diane de Poitiers. You don't yet know her name, but already you feel the shift, the faint tightening in the air, the scent of roses masking rot. The vows are spoken in a language that still feels foreign on your tongue. The gold ring slides onto your finger. Applause echoes through the cathedral, a thunder of expectation that drowns out your own pulse. You smile, as they all expect, and lower your gaze. The crowd sees a queen in the making. You feel only the walls of a gilded cage closing in. That night, as fireworks bloom over the harbor and the guests drink to alliances and glory, you stand alone by the window, watching the reflections scatter across the dark water. France stretches before you like an unfamiliar map, beautiful, dangerous, uncharted. You whisper to the glass, to the sea, to yourself. They sent a girl to France. But one day France will remember my name. The cathedral smells of roses and candle wax, the air thick with incense and expectation. The marble floor glitters beneath your shoes, polished so smooth it seems to shift like water when you move. You keep your steps measured, graceful, deliberate the way they taught you. Every eye in France is watching. The choir rises as you reach the altar. Henri waits there, his posture stiff, his gaze distant. The candlelight gives him a saint's halo, but his expression is that of a man attending a duty rather than a dream. You search his face for warmth and find only patience, a thin, courteous patience that feels colder than indifference. And beside him, not far behind the line of courtiers, stands the woman whose presence steals all the air from the room, Diane de Poitiers. Her beauty is quiet and precise, like the edge of a blade. She does not need to be introduced. You can tell by the way the courtier's eyes shift toward her, by the way Henri's glance drifts when he thinks no one notices. She is nearly twice his age, draped in pearls and confidence. When her gaze meets yours, she smiles not with cruelty, but with possession. It is a smile that says, "I already own what you are about to marry." The ceremony passes as if you are watching someone else live it. The bishop's voice drones like the sea. The Latin words fall heavy and familiar, each syllable sealing your fate a little tighter. When Henri's hand closes over yours, it is warm but unwilling. You repeat your vows, your voice calm, your heart iron. The crown of laurel and gold rests briefly on your head before being lifted away again, a symbol, they say, of virtue and glory. To you, it feels like mockery. After the Mass, the procession moves to the banquet hall, a chamber of mirrors and noise, tables heavy with roasted pheasants and sugared fruits. Music swells, laughter blooms. Courtiers toast your union with words that glint like glass. Henri sits at your side, polite and silent, his fingers tapping absently on the tablecloth. When Diane leans forward to speak to him, his face softens, his voice lowers. You lift your cup to your lips, smiling faintly, the way queens are expected to smile, serene, unknowable, untouchable. Later, when the dancing begins, he excuses himself from your side. You watch as he disappears into the press of silk and jewels, toward her. The courtiers pretend not to notice, and you pretend not to care. You move through the crowd, exchanging the practiced words of diplomacy, your majesty, your grace, your beauty, your fortune. Every sentence feels like a thread being pulled from a tapestry you did not weave. When the night finally breaks into quiet, you find yourself alone in a chamber that smells faintly of sea salt and fading roses. The candles burn low. A single mirror reflects your face, pale, still, unreadable. You remove the jewels one by one, setting them on the table with careful precision. Each drop of gold feels like a promise undone. Outside, fireworks echo faintly over Marseille, their bursts of color invisible from your window. The celebration belongs to France. The silence belongs to you. You stand at the threshold of a new world, your body wrapped in finery, your heart bound in frost. You do not cry. Florence would never forgive that. You only whisper into the dark a vow, not to love, but to endure. And in that whisper, the Medici blood stirs. The chateau smells of lavender and smoke, a sweetness laced with ash. You step from the carriage into a courtyard lined with pale stone and sharper stairs. Courtiers bow low, their silks whispering against the gravel. They speak your name softly, Catherine de Medici, but the title sits in their mouths like something bitter. You are no longer a child of Florence, nor a daughter of Rome. Here, you are the Italian wife, foreign, suspect, ornamental. Your husband rides ahead without a word. Henri's cloak flares in the wind, his figure cutting through the mist like a blade through water. He does not look back. Beside him, always beside him, rides Diane. The court calls her his advisor, his confidant, his charm against melancholy. You have learned to smile when they speak of her. A queen must never look wounded. She must learn to bleed gracefully. In the great hall, the walls climb toward painted heavens, frescoes alive with saints who seem too amused to intervene. The courtiers cluster around Diane as if she were the sun, while you stand in her shadow, expected to glow without warmth. They study you, your accent, your gowns, your every movement, as though cataloguing flaws. Your Florentine silks are deemed too rich, your gestures too restrained, your devotion too quiet. You hear the whispers. She brings poison in her dowry. She hides potions in her sleeves. The Medici bride charms with sorcery, not grace. You eat alone that night, your chair placed ceremoniously at the head of the table but far from conversation. The servants move like smoke, heads bowed. You taste the food carefully, not because you fear it, but because you know they expect you to. In the flickering candlelight you think of Florence, of its golden air, its bold voices, its beauty that never apologized. France is colder, its elegance is edged with cruelty. When Henri visits your chambers, it is not for you. His words are kind, practiced, empty. You offer him the courtesy he gives you, nothing more, nothing less. After he leaves, you stand by the window until dawn, watching mist rise from the fields. Somewhere beyond the horizon, your name is being dissected in salons and chapels, judged by those who have never met you. Days fold into weeks. You walk the gardens alone, your shadow the only companion who never whispers. The fountains murmur in a language older than gossip. You touch the carved marble of Diana, the huntress, bow drawn, eyes unyielding, and almost smile. You understand her devotion to distance. At court, you begin to learn their weapons: flattery, delay, observation. The French smile when they strike, they kiss when they betray. You start to mimic the rhythm of their lies, the measured tone of their gossip. They think you shy, simple, harmless. You let them. A queen in waiting is safest when mistaken for a shadow. One evening, while the court dines and laughter ricochets off gilded walls, you walk the empty chapel. Candles burn low, their wax pooling in small molten altars. You kneel not in prayer, but in promise. You will not let them undo you. They can mock your birth, your accent, your blood, but they cannot yet imagine what patience looks like when taught by Florence. Outside, the bells of the chateau toll the hour. You rise, smoothing your skirts, your reflection trembling in the stained glass. The saints stare down, distant and weary. You meet their gaze with your own and whisper into the silence, "Let them underestimate me." The words, taste of iron and resolve. In France, every breath must be deliberate and every silence weaponized. The chateau is colder in winter, its corridors breathing draughts that creep beneath doors like uninvited thoughts. The servants move quickly, their footsteps echoing on stone floors slick with candle smoke and gossip. You've grown used to the rhythm of the place, the rustle of gowns, the scrape of knives, the low laughter that drifts from rooms you are not welcome in. Every sound belongs to her. Diane de Poitiers. She glides through the palace like moonlight, always half untouchable. Wherever she goes, conversation tilts toward her, as though the air itself knows whom to serve. You catch her perfume long before you see her violet and musk, a scent that lingers like envy. She wears black and white, the colors of widowhood and purity, but her composure is armor, not virtue. She calls you ma chère enfant with a voice like silk over glass, each word a caress that bruises. You watch from a distance as she advises Henri in counsel, her hand occasionally brushing his sleeve as if to remind him who grants his courage. The courtiers pretend not to see. They have learned that pretending is safer. You sit beside the Queen Mother, who whispers prayers while her eyes flick toward Diane with practiced scorn. You, the foreign wife, are expected to look serene, a portrait of patience, and so you do. You smile as the woman who owns your husband's heart speaks for him. In private, Henri is polite, dutiful. He visits when he must, when politics requires an heir. His touch is perfunctory, his apologies softer than his affection. You lie still, counting the breaths between his sighs. The distance between your bodies measured not in inches but in loyalty misplaced. When he leaves, you turn to the window, watching torches flare along the courtyard walls. Somewhere out there, Diane's rooms are still lit, her laughter low and steady. You envy her confidence, not her love. At court, you begin to listen rather than speak. Servants forget how sharp silence can be. You learn where letters are hidden, which alliances tremble, which noble women barter their secrets for proximity. France loves rumor more than truth, and rumor is a weapon you understand. You write long letters to your relatives in Florence, your words careful, delicate, layered. You describe the weather, the music, the hunts, and between the lines you slip reports, names, tones, weaknesses. You start keeping your own counsel and your own collection. A vial of perfume from Florence, laced with herbs the apothecaries here cannot name, a ring engraved with a serpent, worn beneath your glove, a ledger written in cipher. The nuns once taught you patience, now you learn precision. At banquets, Diane sits near Henri, her laughter scattering like pearls. You sit beside them, smiling, speaking little. The courtiers see a queen in shadow and pity her. They mistake stillness for surrender. They do not yet understand that still water can drown as easily as flood. That night, in your chambers, you unpin your jewels one by one. Their weight leaves small crescents in your skin. The candles gutter, and the air tastes faintly of iron and wine. You study your reflection in the mirror, a woman carved from composure, her eyes steady, her mouth set with the faintest ghost of a smile. Let them worship her, you think. Let them forget me. Shadows do not vanish. They wait for the sun to move. The morning light enters your chamber through the high, narrow windows, soft as dust, pale as ash. The fire from the night before still smolders, breathing faint ribbons of smoke that curl toward the ceiling. On the table near your bed sits a small wooden box, its hinges carved with spirals and stars, a gift from Florence. You have not yet opened it. The messenger arrived before dawn, his cloak damp from travel, his face drawn with exhaustion. He spoke no word, only bowed and left the box in your hands, as though it carried confession or sin. You recognized the seal immediately, the Medici crest, pressed deep into red wax. Florence has a way of reaching you even across mountains. It never sends love, only reminders. You unfasten the clasp. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, lie 3 glass vials, each no larger than your thumb. One the color of amber, one green as moss, one clear as tears. Beneath them, a folded letter written in a hand you know too well. To my cousin, the Duchess of Orléans, may fortune guard you where faith cannot. There is no signature, yet you can almost hear your cousin's laugh, the sharp, knowing one you once shared over stolen figs in a Florentine garden. You lift the vials to the light. The glass hums faintly when you tilt it, the way fine metal sings when struck. They smell of nothing, yet the air around them feels changed, charged, aware. These are not perfumes, not medicines. They are possibilities. Florence deals in possibilities, healing, protection, death. In this court, any of the 3 might be required. That evening, you dine beside Henri and Diane. The hall glows with candlelight, the air thick with roasted meat and perfumed oils. Diane's laughter drifts across the table, soft and certain. Henri listens to her as though she were scripture. You eat little. your mind elsewhere, on the vials tucked beneath the lining of your gown, hidden against your ribs. Later, alone in your chambers, you line them on the table beside the mirror. The firelight turns their colors alive: gold, green, clear. You touch each one lightly, as though greeting old friends. You think of the stories the sisters used to tell, of saints who carried relics that burned or healed according to the heart of the bearer. Perhaps this is your relic. Perhaps Florence knows you better than you thought. Outside, the wind moves through the courtyard, rattling shutters, carrying whispers from rooms you'll never enter. You imagine the vials in use, one to charm, one to cure, one to erase. You imagine your hand steady, decisive. Then you imagine it trembling, and you hate the thought of that weakness. You take a long breath, feeling the weight of the glass against your skin. You tell yourself they are for defense, not revenge. But you remember how Florence taught its daughters that survival is not always pure, and mercy is not always wise. The fire pops, a single spark landing on the hem of your gown. You press it out with your palm, leaving a small black mark. It looks almost deliberate. In the mirror, your reflection holds your gaze calm, unsmiling, waiting. The vials gleam faintly behind you, 3 small suns. You blow out the candles, and the room exhales with you. In the dark, you whisper a quiet truth only Florence would understand. Sometimes power comes not from what is used, but from what is kept. You begin to feel it long before the whispers reach your ears. A subtle shift in the air, like the way the light bends before a storm. Servants pause too long in doorways. Courtiers lower their voices when you approach. Laughter dies faster in your presence. France has many ways of saying you do not belong, and silence is one of them. It starts, as all rumors do, with something small. A vial glimpsed in your hand, a letter written in a foreign script, a servant dismissed too suddenly. They call it curiosity at first, the harmless talk that fills empty afternoons. But by the week's end, the stories have changed shape. Now they say the Medici bride keeps charms in her drawers, that she prays not to saints but to spirits, that her shadows move when she sleeps. The same mouths that praised your manners now feed on your mystery. You hear the gossip first from a maid too frightened to lie. They say you keep an apothecary in the east wing, she stammers, eyes fixed on the floor. They say the queen drinks nothing unless you pour it yourself. You let her talk until her courage runs out. When she leaves, you sit in the quiet that follows, the truth of it settling cold and steady. Fear is growing roots. You know how such things begin. Florence was built on intrigue. You recognize the scent of danger disguised as curiosity, so you act the way your tutors once taught. Not with panic, but with poise. You walk the corridors with your chin slightly higher, your smile faint but unbroken. Let them see what they want, an Italian wife with secrets. The trick is to make them wonder whether believing the lie might be safer than disproving it. Still, you are not without allies. Your old Florentine physician sends letters wrapped in codes only you can read. He writes of herbs and humors, but between the lines you find counsel. Never deny what they fear. Fear keeps them cautious. You read it twice, and then burn the letter over a single candle flame, watching the words turn to ash and vanish. At supper, Diane glances toward you across the table, her smile deliberate. "The Duchess studies medicine," she says lightly to those within earshot. A charming habit. Our Italian lady's always so curious. Her tone is smooth, but her eyes gleam with mischief. You match her smile. "Curiosity," you reply, "is a virtue when one has nothing to hide." The courtiers laugh, not knowing whose side they should take. Henri says nothing at all. That night you pour a cup of wine and stare into its surface, dark, glassy, still. The rumors have a taste, you realize, metallic, faintly sweet. Once spoken, they never truly fade. They cling, ferment, bloom. You touch the vial hidden at your wrist and think of Florence again, how power there was never clean, only effective. The moonlight creeps across the floor. painting the room in silver lines. You imagine roots spreading beneath the marble, curling around your feet, twisting upward. Suspicion is a seed, yes, but so is reputation. And if you must be the witch they whisper about, then you will make that name a crown. You blow out the candles. The chamber sinks into darkness, but your reflection lingers in the window, a faint glimmer, watching, waiting, quietly dangerous. Winter breaks slowly over the chateau. The frost recedes inch by inch, reluctant to leave the stone walls where secrets cling. Inside, the air smells of wool and orange peel, of fires banked low against the cold. You wake in silence, your body heavy, your pulse unsteady. The midwives whisper prayers around your bed. One hand presses your shoulder, another mops your brow. Beyond the curtains, courtiers wait like vultures dressed in silk, waiting to hear whether France will have an heir. You think of Florence, of its warmth, its noise, its unrepentant life. You think of the cloisters where they taught you to endure pain with grace. You draw that lesson now like breath, your hands clutching the sheets, your teeth set against the sound you refuse to make. They want a queen who suffers beautifully. You give them that illusion. Hours pass, the kind that bend time into nothing. You drift in and out of darkness until, at last, a cry splits the air, thin, fierce, alive. The midwife lifts a bundle swaddled in linen, her eyes wet with relief. "A boy," she says, and for a moment, everything else, the court, the whispers, the weight of expectation dissolves. You reach out, trembling, and feel the warmth of him against your palm. Tiny, perfect, real. You name him Francois, after the king, and when they take him to present to the court, the sound of the bells outside swells until the walls hum with it. For the first time since you came to France, the people cheer your name. Catherine! Catherine! The same courtiers who once called you foreign now bow lower, their words sweeter. You smile for them, exhausted, radiant, untouchable. In the crowd, Diane de Poitiers stands beside Henri, her hand light on his sleeve, her expression unreadable. You watch her eyes flick toward the child, not you, not the mother, but the crown in the cradle. She knows, as you do, that something irreversible has begun. In the days that follow, the palace changes its tone. You are still the Italian wife, but now you are also the mother of France's future. The servants bow deeper. The queen herself sends you gifts, pearls, prayer books, silks. The air is thick with diplomacy disguised as affection. Even Henri softens. He visits your chambers, awkward in his kindness, his gaze flickering toward the cradle where his son sleeps. "You've done well," he murmurs, and though the words are small, you keep them. They are more than he has ever given. At night, when the corridors fall quiet, you rise and stand by the cradle, watching the rise and fall of your child's breath. His face, so small and unguarded, holds the fragile shape of the future. You whisper to him in Italian, words he will never remember, but that steady your heart. You will never be alone, not while I breathe. Outside, snow begins to fall again, each flake dissolving as it lands on the window pane. You touch the cold glass, feeling the weight of the crown that has not yet touched your head but already presses against your life. For now, you are only a mother. But Florence taught its daughters that only is a word for those without patience. And patience, sharp, silent, and certain, has always been your true inheritance. The boy grows, and with him, your shadow lengthens. The cradle that once sat by your bed now stands at the center of the court's ambitions. Everywhere you walk, heads turn not because of beauty, but because of proximity to power. You feel it in the hush that follows your entrance, in the sudden interest with which men ask about your health. Power is the one perfume no woman is taught to wear, yet you find it lingers on your skin. You have learned to read this court the way a physician reads a pulse, slow, steady, with one ear pressed to the danger beneath the surface. Henri remains distant, his affections still tethered to Diane, but the courtiers who once dismissed you now speak your name with care. They bring petitions, letters, flattery. They have seen what Florence bred into its daughter's endurance that looks like grace, and grace that hides calculation. You spend your mornings in the nursery, where sunlight pools across the floorboards, and your son's laughter softens the world. He grips your finger with a force far greater than his size, and you realize power begins with the instinct to hold on. Nurses chatter about his health, his appetite, his resemblance to his father. You listen and smile, but in your mind, you are already building fortresses around him, invisible ones, made of influence and information. In the afternoons, you hold audiences. The Queen Mother has grown ill, her hold on affairs weakening. You step quietly into the space she leaves behind. The ministers, uncertain at first, begin to consult you on matters of etiquette, then finance, then diplomacy. You speak sparingly, never enough to appear presumptuous, but just enough to be remembered. It is a delicate alchemy to seem obedient while guiding the current. You let them think they are steering, while the tide obeys you instead. Letters arrive from Florence, heavy with wax and warning. Your cousin writes that the Medici banks are thriving again. Gold flows as it once did, and with it comes influence and danger. Trust no one, the letter reads, especially those who call you friend. You burn it after reading, but the smoke smells faintly of home. At banquets, you wear deeper colors, garnet, onyx, dark emerald shades that silence gossip. You move with the composure of marble and the patience of an architect. When Diane enters, laughter rises like heat. When you enter, it stops. You pretend not to notice. She smiles across the hall, her eyes amused. You return it barely, precisely, a queen's acknowledgement of another woman's dominion. Henry speaks to you now of duty, of alliances, of heirs. You nod and answer softly, shaping each word like clay. You do not remind him that you have already given him what France demanded, a dynasty that will bear his name and your will. When night comes, you sit by the window and write. The ink glides across the page like breath, messages to Rome, to Florence, to the future. The moonlight catches the ring on your finger, the serpent from your youth, and it glints like memory, like promise, like warning. You smile faintly. Power, you have learned, is not something given. It is something accumulated, grain by grain, in silence. And silence, in your hands, has begun to sound very much like command. The banners of mourning hang from the palace walls, their black silk trembling in the wind. The air itself feels heavier, perfumed candles burning too long, corridors draped in grief that feels rehearsed. Henri is dead. The words still feel distant, unreal. They reached you on a whisper carried through the courtyard, followed by the sound of running feet and the crack of hooves in the gravel. A joust, they said. A lance splintered. A splinter lodged behind his eye. A crowd's cheer dying into silence. Now, the court grieves noisily, not for the man, but for their uncertainty. A dead king is a dangerous pause in a country that fears the unknown. You sit in your chamber, still in the black gown they gave you, the lace veil heavy against your skin. You keep your hands folded, you do not cry. Florence taught you long ago that tears are for those who have the luxury of safety. The courtiers pass like shadows outside your door, their whispers thick as fog. They speculate about succession, about your sons, about the kingdom's new shape. None of them speak of you except in fragments: the Italian widow, the silent queen, the Medici enchantress. You have heard it all before. The difference now is that no one can tell you to sit quietly and smile. Henri's death has changed the gravity of the room. The power that once curved around him has shifted toward you. When you walk through the halls, they bow lower than before. Even Diane de Poitiers is gone, banished within days of the funeral. You gave the order softly, almost kindly, but the venom in it was pure. You sent her away with her estates, her jewels, her pride. She had held your husband's heart for decades, but his crown, in the end, belonged to you. You wear it like silence, a silence that makes men nervous. At the funeral, the church trembles with the weight of incense. The nobles kneel, the bishops chant, and you stand motionless beside the coffin. Henri's sons line the altar, their faces pale, their eyes frightened. You place your hand on Francois's shoulder, the new king. He is 15, trembling beneath the weight of France. The crown rests above him, glittering with history, heavy as inheritance. You whisper to him, "Breathe. It belongs to both of us now." Later that night, when the torches are extinguished and the palace finally exhales, you remove your veil. The mirror reflects a face sharper than you remember, the years of restraint etched into your expression like fine script. You think of all the words you swallowed, all the decisions made in rooms where you were not invited. That era is finished. You pour a glass of dark wine, the kind Henri preferred, and raise it toward the empty chair by the fire. "You had your mistress," you murmur. "I have your throne." The words hang there, neither bitter nor sweet, only true. Beyond the windows, the bells toll midnight, their sound long and deliberate. The widowed queen listens, unflinching. France is about to learn what silence sounds like when it begins to speak. The boy sits on the throne that once dwarfed his father. The crown slips slightly on his hair, the scepter trembles in his grip. You stand behind him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder, a gesture meant to soothe, though everyone in the chamber knows what it truly means. France has a king, yes, but it is his mother who rules. The courtiers bow low, their silks whispering, their eyes flicking between you and the child. You recognize the glint behind their smiles' calculation. Every man in this room is already imagining himself your ally or your enemy. Some will try to flatter you, others to frighten you, but all will underestimate you. It is the one mistake you can always count on. The coronation ends with a banquet. Musicians play, servants glide, the table groans with peacocks and gilded fruit. Your son eats little, his stomach too tight with nerves. You keep your expression calm, your movements deliberate, like still water over a deep current. The nobles raise their cups and drink to the young majesty, but the toasts all flow toward you. The widow regent, the Italian queen, the mother whose patience has teeth. In the days that follow, the business of ruling begins, and with it, resistance. The king's uncles circle like hawks, each claiming experience, loyalty, and divine insight. They argue in low voices, insisting the boy must be guided by men, not by a mother. You listen, smiling faintly, never interrupting, until the room grows tired of its own noise. "Gentlemen," you say, "a kingdom guided by too many hands will soon find itself headless." They laugh uneasily. You do not. You fill the council with men who owe you favors, priests who fear your silence, and scholars who remember your father's generosity. You study decrees late into the night, your eyes burning from candlelight, your hands ink-stained. Power, you discover, is not in the signatures of kings, but in the spaces between them, the clauses, the whispers, the debts. You weave those threads quietly, one letter at a time. Your son grows restless beneath the weight of ceremony. He wants to hunt, to dance, to prove himself. You let him, within reason. He must believe he is free. Freedom, after all, is the surest way to keep a man obedient. You watch him from the windows as he rides into the fields, his laughter sharp in the wind. You remember him as an infant, a fragile heartbeat wrapped in linen. Now he carries a crown. You carry the kingdom. At night, when the palace is hushed and even the guards drift towards sleep, you walk the halls alone. The portraits of dead kings line the walls, their eyes following you. You meet their gaze without flinching. You are not their kind, not a soldier, not a saint, but you are something rarer. You are the hand that survives the sword. The moonlight paints your reflection in the glass, pale and unyielding. The boy king dreams, the courtiers whisper, the country breathes. You whisper back, soft and certain, "France will learn to move to my rhythm." And somewhere, in the silence between heartbeats, the old kingdom begins to listen. Morning spills over the Loire like melted gold, catching on the windows of the chateau until the halls blaze with light. You walk slowly through the gallery, trailing your fingers along the velvet drapes. They feel like the surface of memory, soft, dark, a place where things are hidden rather than erased. The servants follow at a distance, silent as smoke. They've learned to move the way you think, quietly, efficiently, unseen. The boy king still sleeps. You allow him that luxury. Children should dream, even if their dreams are heavy with prophecy. Outside his chamber, 2 guards stand rigid, their armor bright as mirrors. You see your reflection split across their breastplates, a widow in black, her expression unreadable. It is strange, you think, how power feels like both armor and wound. In your chamber, the fire burns low. The mirror across the room reflects the crown resting on the table beside it. Gold and rubies gleam in the dim light, and for a moment it seems to breathe, alive in its stillness. You approach it slowly, the way one might approach a sleeping predator. You have worn that weight before on the day they crowned your son, when you knelt as the people cheered for a boy too young to rule and a mother too dangerous to dismiss. You lift it now and feel its familiar heaviness in your hands. Crowns, you've learned, are not made to adorn. They are made to bruise. Beneath the jewels and polish, the metal leaves its mark, a faint circle that lingers on the skin long after the ceremony ends. You place it back on the table, steadying your breath. You will wear it again soon enough, not on your head, but in your bearing, your gaze, your words. A knock at the door interrupts your thoughts. It is your secretary, bringing letters sealed with the wax of kingdoms. England writes of alliances, Spain writes of marriages. The Pope writes of gratitude and warning. You read them all without expression, though inside, something old and sharp begins to stir that Florentine instinct for the game. The world is shifting, and you must move faster than any man who believes you cannot. When the secretary leaves, you pour yourself a glass of watered wine and stand before the mirror again. You study your reflection not as vanity, but as strategy. The lines around your eyes tell of years spent waiting, watching, surviving. You touch the edge of your veil, straighten your shoulders. The mirror gives nothing back but honesty. In it, you see not the frightened bride of years ago, nor the grieving widow of yesterday, but the quiet architect of tomorrow. You have become the thing Florence always meant you to be: patient, precise, unbreakable. Outside, the bells of the chapel begin to toll, marking the hour of Mass. You listen without moving, letting the sound roll through the corridors like a wave. Each note is a reminder: kingdoms rise and fall, but silence cultivated, sharpened, endures. You turn away from the mirror and draw back the curtains. The winter sun floods the room, cold and blinding. Somewhere in its brilliance, the crown glints faintly on the table. You do not reach for it. You no longer need to. It already lives in the steadiness of your hand, the calm in your voice, the certainty in your gaze. Florence gave you survival. France will remember you for what comes next. It begins as an idea whispered between candles, not by ministers, not by priests, but by you. The court is a battlefield where weapons are words, and spies wear silk instead of steel. France is crawling with enemies you cannot name, and allies you cannot trust. So, you decide to make your own, not with soldiers, but with women. They are chosen quietly, one by one, from among the maids, the courtiers' daughters, the widows who have nowhere to turn. You see their faces first, then their eyes. Eyes reveal more than bloodlines ever could. Some are clever, some beautiful, some both, all underestimated. You teach them to move like whispers, to smile as though sin were perfume. You teach them how to listen, how to make powerful men forget that silence can be sharper than a dagger. You call them les escadrons volants, the flying squadron. They are not your handmaids, they are your shadows. Each one sent to a different corner of the court, each one loyal only to you. The courtiers laugh at the name when they first hear it. They think it a jest, a charming indulgence of the Queen Mother. You let them laugh. A jest is the perfect disguise for a revolution. Your ladies move through the palace like notes in a song no one else can hear. Their gowns brush against velvet curtains where secrets hide. They share smiles over goblets of wine, let noblemen's hands linger just long enough to loosen tongues. They bring back more than gossip: names, plots, debts, weaknesses. You write everything down yourself, in cipher, on sheets of parchment that burn to ash when touched by water. Soon, you know more than the king's council. You know which nobleman plots for Spain, which bishop whispers to Rome, which general takes gold from both sides of a border. You hold their sins like pearls in a rosary, counting each one carefully. When a man becomes troublesome, you do not confront him, you simply shift the wind around him. A rumor placed here, a letter delayed there. By the time he realizes he has fallen, the trap has already been buried. Your son, Francois, believes you spend your days in prayer and embroidery. He does not see the machinery turning behind your calm smile. He still thinks power is something men perform on battlefields. You let him keep that illusion. There are kinds of strength he is not yet ready to understand, the kind that kills without spilling blood. One evening, as you dismiss your attendants, one of your young spies lingers by the door. Her name is Marguerite. She curtsies, eyes gleaming with the excitement of new information. "He told me everything," she whispers. You smile, tracing the rim of your wineglass. "Of course he did," you answer softly. "They always do." When she leaves, you sit alone by the fire, feeling the warmth spread slowly through the cold stone room. Outside, the bells of the city toll, and you imagine their sound as wings beating against the night. The court believes they dance to entertain you. They have no idea the dance is war. You close your eyes, hearing the soft flutter of silk behind every door, the flight of your squadron, moving through the dark, loyal only to their queen. The palace glitters like a dream gilded in deceit. Music ripples through the great hall flutes, viols, and the rhythmic stamp of dancers' shoes. Candles shimmer in crystal chandeliers, their light trembling in time with laughter. Tonight, the air smells of rosewater and lies. You designed this mask yourself, every costume, every gesture, every illusion. The courtiers believe they are here for pleasure. You know they are here for revelation. The flying squadron moves among them in silks, the color of dusk, veiled, perfumed, smiling. Men follow them as moths follow flame. Behind each laugh, each flutter of a fan, a secret trades hands. You sit at the head of the hall beneath the painted ceiling of gods and cherubs, your face calm, your eyes sharp. You watch the masks move, a swirl of gold, silver, and intrigue, and you count the alliances forming like constellations you alone can read. Henri's son, your young king, dances with a Bourbon cousin too ambitious for innocence. You study her steps, the way she leans just a little too close, the faint pride in her smile. A whisper from one of your ladies confirms what you already suspected. Her family plots with Spain. You will not confront her. You will simply let the room devour her with curiosity. By morning, her name will be salt on every tongue. The musicians play faster, the tempo lifting the mood. Beneath the merriment, you sense the court's hunger for favor, for safety, for your approval. You sip from a glass of sweetened wine, its surface trembling slightly in your hand. You think of Florence, its masquerades, its politics dressed in laughter. The Medici have always understood the power of spectacle. Let them call it decadence. It is simply strategy in satin. Your spies move with precision. A young count bends close to one of your women, whispering the Duke of Guise's plans between compliments. Another noble's laughter cracks as your attendants mention his debts. You gather it all in silence, weaving the night's chaos into order. Power, after all, is not what one holds, it is what one knows. Midway through the dance, you rise. The crowd parts as you glide across the marble floor, your black gown trailing like ink. Conversation falters, the music softens. You take a mask from a passing tray, silver, shaped like a swan, and lift it to your face. For a moment, the room forgets its breath. You raise your glass, smiling just enough to be mistaken for benevolence. To France, you say, your voice carrying like a bell, may our masks always fit. Laughter erupts, too quick, too nervous. They think you jest, you let them. You take a slow sip of wine, watching the ripples fade in the glass, as if studying prophecy. Around you, the masquerade continues, dancers spinning, silk brushing silk, deceit circling deceit. When the music swells again, you leave before the final bow. In the corridor, the air cools, sharp and unscented. You breathe deeply, the night pressing against the windows like a secret. Inside the hall, the laughter continues, hollow and bright. You smile to yourself. They think the masks protect them. You know better. Masks do not hide truth, they simply teach people how to perform it. The banquet is splendid, suffocating, and perfumed with danger. Golden plates gleam beneath candlelight, the air heavy with roasted meats, spiced wine, and tension disguised as civility. You sit at the center of it all serene, listening while laughter hums around you like a swarm of bees. The courtiers never understand how much can be heard in the space between their jokes. Across the table, a duke gestures grandly as he speaks, a man too confident in his importance to measure his words. He praises Spain too loudly, mocks your counsel too freely. You smile as if amused, fingers resting lightly against the stem of your goblet. Around him, others follow his laughter, the sound brittle and brave. You watch the tremor in his hand as he lifts his wine. You know that kind of tremor. It comes from fear disguised as arrogance. The kitchen door opens, and the servants glide forward, carrying trays of sugared fruits and pastries. The scent of almonds drifts through the air, soft, sweet, faintly bitter. A Florentine perfume. A memory. For a heartbeat, the room stills. Some glance at you, expecting a reaction. You give them none. Florence taught you long ago that scent is language. Tonight, you are fluent in silence. The Duke lifts a small almond tart from his plate. He hesitates barely before taking a bite. You watch him chew, laugh again, drink. Time slows. The music plays, the courtiers chatter, the fire pops in the hearth. And then, a cough, sharp, wet, ragged. Another. The laughter falters. The Duke's hand grips the table, knuckles whitening. He gasps, his face flushing crimson before paling to the color of wax. Chairs scrape, voices rise. The hall ripples with confusion, fear, the metallic scent of panic. You do not move. You sip your wine, slow and deliberate, and when they look to you, because they always do, your eyes are calm. "Fetch a physician," you murmur, and your voice cuts through the noise like a blade through silk. He is dead before the physician arrives. The courtiers murmur prayers, cross themselves, glance at one another. None of them mention poison, not aloud. They all think it, they all know it. The almond scent lingers, soft as regret. Later, alone in your chambers, you wash your hands in rose water. The surface ripples, catching candlelight, distorting your reflection into something unfamiliar. You trace the rim of the basin and think of Florence, of those quiet gardens where apothecaries whispered that every cure could also be a curse. You never learned the recipes yourself. You never needed to. You dry your hands and sit by the window, the moon hanging above the courtyard like a coin balanced on the edge of a blade. The court will call it fate, or divine punishment, or the price of blasphemy. They will speak your name in frightened whispers tomorrow, and in that fear, you will find peace. Somewhere below, an owl calls long, low, lonely. You close your eyes, breathing in the faint trace of almonds still clinging to the air. In France, power always leaves an aftertaste. And tonight, it tastes faintly, perfectly, of home. The wind that sweeps across Paris carries not perfume now, but smoke. It smells of burning parchment, of sermons turned to ash. The city hums beneath your feet like a hive ready to sting itself to death. Priests thunder from their pulpits, nobles whisper in their halls, and every whisper carries a name: Huguenot, Protestant, heretic. Each word strikes flint against faith until sparks scatter into riot. You read the reports each morning: cities divided, altars overturned, families dragged from their beds for the sin of praying in the wrong tongue. Your council clamors for action. The Duke of Guise demands blood. The Admiral Coligny pleads for peace. The king, your son, is caught between them, young, impressionable, too easily swayed by the last voice he hears. So you make sure the last voice is always yours. At the council table you speak softly, letting the others exhaust themselves. You listen to Guy's shout of honor and vengeance, his fists pounding the wood. You let him finish before you say, "France cannot afford another war, my lord. We cannot burn half the kingdom to purify the other." Your tone is measured, reasonable, the sound of control. He glares, but he bows. Even rage must obey when spoken to calmly enough. You propose compromise, edicts of tolerance, limited freedoms, a hope to quiet the unrest. It pleases no one, and that is its genius. The dissatisfied are predictable, and predictability is power. You sign your name to the decree, the quill gliding through your signature like a blade through silk. You know the ink will not dry before it is contested. That evening, you walk the palace gardens as dusk falls, the scent of lavender, unable to mask the bitterness in the air. Guards stand at intervals among the hedges, their shadows long against the gravel. A group of courtiers lingers near the fountain, their voices hushed. The Queen Mother favors heretics, one says. She marries France to the devil himself. You turn the corner before they can see you. The words do not wound. They confirm. Your son finds you beneath the linden trees. His youth clings to him like perfume, sweet, temporary. "Mother," he says, "they call you faithless." You smile faintly. "Faith is a luxury, my son. I prefer stability." He doesn't answer, and in his silence you hear the kingdom's future, a boy torn between cross and crown. That night you write letters by candlelight, your ink smudged by the trembling of the wick. To Rome you promise devotion. To the Huguenots you promise safety. To both you promise nothing. Florence taught you this balance, how mercy and manipulation share the same vocabulary when spoken in the right tone. When the bells ring for midnight mass, you pause at your window. The Seine moves like ink through the sleeping city, reflecting the firelight of unseen riots. You whisper to the dark, not in prayer but in warning. Peace is never born of purity, it is born of exhaustion. Behind you the candle burns low, its wax pooling like spilled blood. You leave it unextinguished. Some flames, you know, must be allowed to devour themselves. Rain slicks the cobblestones of the Louvre courtyard, turning every reflection into a blurred confession. The air hums with tension, with the scent of wet iron and horse sweat. The guards shift uneasily, their armor whispering as if it too senses what is coming. Inside, the corridors are colder than usual. Even the fire in the council chamber burns low, as though unwilling to witness what must be done. You sit at the head of the long oak table, the maps of France spread before you like a patient awaiting surgery. Around you, the kingdom's most powerful men, Guise, Montmorency, Bourbon, argue in circles, their words dripping with piety and poison. The question that devours them all is the same. How does one rule a country that has begun to believe in two gods? The Duke of Guise leans forward, his eyes fever bright. "We cleanse it," he says, his voice low but sharp. "We strike before they do. France must be united under one faith, or it will not be France at all." Coligny, standing near the window, answers without looking at him. Blood will not heal the wound, only deepen it. His reflection trembles in the rain-streaked glass. You watch them both, the wolf and the dove, and you know they are both wrong. You let the silence stretch until it becomes unbearable. Then, softly, "Gentlemen, it is not faith that divides France. It is fear, and fear, I assure you, can be managed." The room stills. They lean closer, unsure if you are offering mercy or threat. You have long since learned that the most effective policy is a sentence that can be interpreted either way. You stand, moving toward the map, tracing the lines of provinces with your fingertips. "We cannot kill half the country," you say, "but we can remind them that rebellion is expensive." The words are calm, precise, and they taste of iron. Some hear reason, others hear permission. You give them both what they want. The next morning, royal envoys are sent out under seals of crimson wax. They carry edicts, orders, warnings. None bear your name, but your handwriting guides them. You do not need to give the command. You only need to create the conditions in which others will believe the command was necessary. That is the true language of power. By week's end, the reports begin to arrive. Executions, raids, towns quieted by terror rather than faith. You read each one without expression, the words ghosting through your mind like smoke. The courtiers call it justice. You call it control. The blood spilled today will fertilize the soil of tomorrow's peace, or so you tell yourself, over and over, until the thought no longer tastes bitter. When night comes, you dismiss your attendants and walk alone through the gallery of kings. Their portraits line the walls, men who ruled with swords and saints. You stop before Henri's, his painted eyes as cold in death as they were in life. You ruled through passion, you whisper. I will rule through consequence. Outside, thunder rolls across the city, slow and deliberate. You turn from the portrait and close the door behind you. The sound of rain hides everything, the prayers, the screams, the steady beat of your own heart. France sleeps, dreaming of peace. You sit at your desk, ink-stained and sleepless, and write one final note. Mercy is for those who can afford it. The bells of Paris toll in the distance, low and weary, as though even heaven hesitates to listen. You stand at the window of your chamber, the night pressing close against the glass. The air smells of rain, smoke, and unrest. Below, the city moves like something alive, murmuring, shifting, waiting. It is August of 1572, and the streets are swollen with strangers come for a royal wedding that was meant to bind France together. You know better. Nothing that binds men can ever hold if it cuts across their faith. The torches along the Seine flicker in the wind, their flames thin as breath. Somewhere beyond them, in the narrow alleys and crowded inns, soldiers hide their armor beneath plain clothes. 1,000 swords sleeping beneath linen. You can feel the weight of it, the tension before the storm, the silence before the wound. It has taken weeks of whispers to bring the city to this point, and now all it will take is one spark. You think of the boy you raised into a king, of the way he wrings his hands when confronted with decision. Francois was soft, Charles is restless. He paces, muttering about treachery and loyalty, his eyes darting between his advisers like a man searching for permission to act. You have watched him all day, the fear in him disguised as rage. They plan to kill me, he said. You touched his arm and whispered, then strike first. The words came easier than you expected. In the antechamber, courtiers wait, pale and tight-lipped. The Duke of Guise, always the hound, kneels before the king and kisses his hand. The Admiral Coligny lies wounded in his bed, shot by an unknown assailant, but everyone knows whose shadow pulled the string. The court pretends to pray for his recovery. You know they pray for the opposite. A servant enters, bowing low. The hour is near, he says. You nod, and he withdraws, leaving only the faint smell of tallow and fear. You cross to the mirror. The candlelight carves your reflection into planes of gold and shadow. You look at your face, the calm mouth, the steady eyes, and think how easily history will misinterpret them. They will call it cruelty, ambition, vengeance. They will not see the truth, that chaos, left unchecked, devours everything, and sometimes peace requires precision. Midnight approaches. The bells begin again, closer now, echoing through the palace stones. You open the window. The air is cool, trembling with distant sound, the faint rhythm of marching feet, the bark of a command, a door splintering somewhere far away. Then, a scream. High, brief, swallowed by the night. And another, and another. You close the window slowly, carefully, as though trapping silence inside. The city below convulses steel, smoke, and faith turned feral. You light another candle, its flame wavering but unbroken. So it begins, you whisper, not as a queen but as a mother who has run out of choices. The bells of Saint-Germain ring again, And this time, they do not sound like warning. They sound like absolution. Dawn comes grey and trembling, crawling over Paris like a wounded thing. The mist hangs low, thick as mourning cloth, muffling the sounds that still echo through the streets, boots striking stone, shutters slamming shut, the dull weight of something heavy dragged across cobblestone. You stand at the window again, the same window from which you watched the night begin. Only now, the air no longer smells of rain. It smells of iron, smoke, and grief. The Seine moves sluggishly beneath the bridges, its surface bruised by debris, broken crates, tattered banners, a single shoe spinning aimlessly in the current. Beneath it, float bodies. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. The water carries them without protest, the river too old to distinguish between the innocent and the guilty. You watch a red ribbon unfurl across the grey, spreading wider, dissolving a river reclaiming its colour. The courtiers move through the halls in silence. Their fine clothes still smell faintly of the torches they held. Some avert their eyes when they pass you. Others, emboldened, bow too deeply, their gratitude a performance meant to mask their terror. They will call you saviour today and monster tomorrow. It makes no difference. The dead do not care about names. Your son does not come down from his chamber. When you find him, he is sitting by the fire, staring at his hands as though they belong to someone else. "It is done," he murmurs. His voice cracks. They are gone. You kneel beside him, smoothing his hair the way you did when he was a child, when his nightmares were only dreams of falling. "No," you tell him softly. "It has only begun." Outside, the bells ring for Mass. The irony is not lost on you. The priests will bless the survivors, the soldiers will confess their sins, and Paris will breathe again for now. But beneath that breath, the rot will deepen. Violence is not an act, it is a contagion. Once released, it moves on its own. You walk the corridors, past the guards still stained with what they've done, past the trembling servants who cannot meet your gaze. A door stands open at the far end of the gallery, and through it you glimpse the courtyard, the stones dark and slick with rain or blood, you cannot tell which. A single bird hops across them, unbothered. The world, indifferent, continues. You return to your chamber and wash your hands in rosewater until the bowl clouds pink. The scent, once comforting, turns cloying. In the mirror, your reflection watches you without judgment. You whisper to it, "France will survive this." It does not answer. Beyond the window, the river carries its burden toward the sea. For a moment, you imagine the bodies will rise again, not in anger, but in memory. You know better. The water will wash them clean, the city will rebuild, and history will forget their names long before it forgets yours. When night comes, you close the shutters and let the darkness settle like a veil. Somewhere below, the Seine whispers as it moves, and you wonder whether the river weeps or simply learns to flow red more quietly. The court smells of incense again, as though the church could drown out the stench of what was done. Priests fill the chapel, chanting for the souls of the fallen, their Latin rising like smoke through the rafters. You sit in the front pew, hands folded, head bowed, the very image of penitence. The courtiers behind you whisper prayers that sound more like apologies. The city outside still scrubs its streets, its gutters, its conscience. Paris pretends to be clean, but the ghosts of St. Bartholomew do not wash away so easily. When the bells fall silent, you rise. The echo of your footsteps fills the nave, every eye follows. To them, you are the architect of the massacre, the mother of it all, the Italian witch who turned France against itself. They do not know the truth, and they would not believe it if they did, that you did not command the slaughter, only open the door and let chaos walk through. Sometimes a single hesitation is all it takes for history to write you as its villain. The ambassadors from Rome and Madrid arrive soon after, carrying congratulations dressed as condolences. "God has restored order to France," one says, bowing low. "You have preserved the faith." You smile faintly, the kind of smile that reveals nothing. Faith, you think, has little to do with it. Faith burns too easily. What remains afterward is politics ash shaped into prayer. Later, you dine with your son, King Charles, though he barely eats. His skin has lost its color, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "Mother," he whispers, "they say I am damned." You place your hand on his, steady, cool. "No, my son," you tell him. Only remembered, he does not understand that those two words are the same curse. When he leaves, you remain by the table, watching the candles collapse into themselves, their flames shiver, small and uncertain. You think of the faces of those who died, men who plotted against you, women who did nothing but pray in the wrong way. The thought should sicken you. It does not. You have grown used to necessity. The next morning, you summon your council. The room smells of damp parchment and unease. Some look away when you enter, others bow too deeply. You speak before any of them can. France is not guilty, you begin. France is cleansed. The words fall heavy, final. They nod because they must, but you see the flicker in their eyes, the fear that you may not believe it either. When they leave, you open the windows. The city stretches before you, bruised and restless. In the square below, workers scrub the stone steps of the cathedral, their brushes scraping rhythmically as though erasing memory. You watch until the sun begins to fade, and then you speak softly to the empty room. If peace is built on blood, then let history call me cruel, but let it also call me effective. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of smoke from the riverbank. You close the window gently. Paris exhales, but you do not. The air is too heavy with ghosts, and the truth that sometimes survival sounds exactly like confession. The palace has grown quieter since that night. The musicians still play, the servants still move through their routines, but something in the rhythm has changed, slower, cautious, as if every sound waits for permission. You notice it most in your son. Charles sits for hours at the window, his crown abandoned on a table nearby, his fingers stained with ink and wine. He does not speak much now, except to ask questions that have no answers. "How many?" he asks one evening, eyes fixed on the Seine. You tell him not to count ghosts. He nods, though you both know he already has. The courtiers whisper that the king has gone mad. You see the truth. Madness is simply the cost of power without preparation. He was born to rule, but not to command. He feels the weight of every death, as if each one calls his name. You have tried to shield him from the noise, the petitions, the protests, the sermons that condemn and glorify him in the same breath, but you cannot silence the sound that matters most, the echo inside his own head. At council meetings, he startles easily. The scrape of a chair, the shuffle of parchment, they pull his gaze sharp as a blade. The ministers mistake it for paranoia. You recognize it as guilt. It curls around him like smoke. You feed him calm words, soft as lullabies. You have secured peace, you tell him. You have given France stability. He looks at you as if he wants to believe. But faith, once cracked, never holds again. At night, his footsteps wake you, restless pacing, muffled sobs, muttered prayers. Once, you find him in the chapel, kneeling before the altar, whispering the names of the dead. His shoulders shake, his voice breaks on every 10th name. You do not stop him. Instead, you kneel beside him, your hand resting lightly on his back. You cannot save them, you murmur. You can only save what they left behind. It is the kindest lie you know. Days later, during a royal audience, he falters. A group of ambassadors stands before the throne, their words rehearsed, their faces polite. Midway through their speech, Charles rises suddenly, shouting for silence. His voice cracks through the hall like a whip. "Do you think I don't hear them?" he cries. "Do you think they stop screaming when the doors close?" The courtiers freeze. You step forward at once, placing a steady hand on his arm. "Enough," you whisper. He looks at you, eyes hollow, face pale, and sits. You smile at the assembly as though nothing has happened. It is an art you have mastered. containing catastrophe behind a calm expression. When the hall empties, he breaks apart in your arms like something fragile that was never meant to carry a crown. "You made me king," he sobs. You hold him tighter. "No," you answer quietly. "France did. I only kept it from eating you alive." Later, alone, you stare at the empty throne. The silk cushions bear the faint imprint of his shape, a boy's shadow pretending to be a king. You know the truth the court dares not speak. His burden is not ruling France, it is surviving it, and as his mother, that burden has become yours as well. The mornings have turned hollow. The sunlight that once spilled through the palace windows now lies thin and colorless, unable to warm the marble floors. You walk the corridors, hearing your son before you see him, the uneven rhythm of pacing feet, the restless rustle of silk. When you enter, he stands before the hearth, his back to you, his shoulders hunched like a man twice his age. The fire burns low, its smoke staining the ceiling grey. Charles no longer dresses as a king. His crown gathers dust on the table beside a goblet half full of watered wine. He mutters to himself, fragments of confession and denial blending into one long broken prayer. "They said it would end," he whispers, "that it was God's will. But I still hear them. You do not ask who they are. You know. The voices belong to the past, to the men and women who died believing they were right." You approach slowly, your hands clasped behind you. "You cannot live in that night forever," you tell him. "France has moved on. So must you." He turns, and for the first time you see how hollow he's become. His eyes are ringed with shadows, his mouth drawn tight. "Do you sleep, mother?" he asks quietly. "Do you dream of the river?" You hold his gaze and lie. "No." Outside, the gardens are in bloom again. Roses, lilies, the hum of bees. The world insists on its own renewal, even when the human heart refuses. You walk with him through the courtyard, your arm through his, the way you once did when he was a child learning to climb stairs. The courtiers bow as you pass, but their eyes avoid the king's. They sense weakness the way wolves sense blood. You tighten your grip on his arm. A messenger arrives breathless with news of unrest in the provinces, another uprising, another city burning in the name of faith. Charles closes his eyes, his voice barely audible. It will never end. Later, in the council chamber, he signs an edict with a trembling hand, his signature sprawling like a wound across the parchment. When it is done, he stares at the ink as though it were blood. "How many more, mother?" he asks. "How many must die before France is clean?" You give him the only answer left, until it forgets how to hate. That night, he dreams aloud again, names, cries, fragments of hymns twisted into screams. You sit by his bed, the candlelight flickering over his face. He thrashes, gasps, reaches for you as if drowning. You catch his hand and hold it until his breathing steadies. When he wakes, you smooth his hair and whisper, "You are safe." But even as you say it, you feel the lie crumble between your teeth. When dawn comes, you rise before him, standing at the window as the city stirs below. The bells ring for morning mass, clear and beautiful, the same bells that once tolled for slaughter. You watch the first rays of light touch the roofs of Paris and think how strange it is that the sun still rises over a world that has forgotten what mercy sounds like. Innocence, you realize, is not something that dies all at once. It fades, quietly, like the last note of a song no one dares to finish. The tapestries in the great hall have begun to fade. Their once vivid reds turned the color of dried wine. You stand beneath them, watching your younger sons file into the chamber one by one, princes grown tall, restless, aware that the crown sits uneasily on their brother's head. The air feels thick with unspoken questions, heavy with inheritance. Charles's illness worsens by the week. The physicians offer potions and prayers, but you see the truth each morning when you visit his chamber. The crown is already looking for another head. Henri, your second son, is the clever one. His eyes are sharp, his voice smooth as polished glass. He bows deeply when he greets you, all charm and calculation. "France needs certainty, mother," he says. If the king dies without an heir, who will hold the kingdom together? You smile faintly, your fingers resting on the edge of the table, where maps of France lie spread like veins. Who indeed? You answer. The youngest, Francois, stands apart, quieter, his gaze uncertain. He was always gentler than his brothers, more monk than monarch. You love him for that, and you fear it too. The world does not forgive gentle kings. As you sit among them, you realize what Florence prepared you for was not marriage nor motherhood, but this: the art of managing ambition before it devours blood. You pour wine, gesture for them to drink, and watch their faces in the candlelight. Each one believes himself chosen. None understand that France will choose for them, and France, like any beast, hungers for whoever appears strongest. That night, you visit Charles. He lies motionless, pale as linen, his breath shallow. When you touch his hand, it feels like paper. He stirs but does not wake. In the candle's glow, his features look younger, almost like the boy who once clung to your skirts, frightened of storms. You lean close, whispering not to comfort him but to steady yourself. You are still my son, you say, but the kingdom cannot wait for your recovery. Behind you, the curtains shift with a draft. You turn, half expecting to see one of your sons in the doorway. The corridor beyond is empty, only the sound of the wind, low and insistent. You know what it wants to say. Choose. In council the next morning, you mention Henri's name. The ministers nod. They remember his victories abroad, his daring, his charm. A prince polished in foreign courts, ready to return home and claim his place. The decision feels inevitable and dangerous. Henri will not inherit, he will conquer. When word reaches him, a letter arrives in return, brief, precise, written in his tight hand. If my brother falls, I will return to serve France. And you, my mother, will always be my compass. You fold the parchment and hold it to the fire. For a moment you hesitate, then let the flame take it. You watch it burn until only ash remains, rising in a slow spiral toward the ceiling. The smoke smells faintly of rosemary and parchment of memory and prophecy. You whisper to the emptiness, "Let the crown find him then, but let it remember who placed it there." Outside, the bells toll for evening prayer. They ring not for the dying king, nor for the restless heir, but for you, the quiet axis around which France still turns. Confession has always smelled of dust and wine. You sit in the dim chapel, its air close and heavy, the flicker of candlelight carving the priest's silhouette behind the iron grate. Outside, rain patters faintly against the roof, steady as the ticking of a clock. It has been years since you entered a confessional, yet the shape of it feels familiar. The narrowness, the sense that words here are meant to be buried, not absolved. "Speak, my daughter," the priest murmurs. His voice is calm, practiced, unafraid. You close your eyes. "It is not sin that brings me here," you say softly. "It is memory." There's a pause, long enough for the candle to gutter. "Then memory is your penance," he answers. You tell him pieces of the truth, that you have seen death become governance, mercy become liability, faith turned into theatre. You do not say the names, you never say names. The priest listens, silent, except for the faint rustle of his robe. When you finish, he asks, "And what of your conscience?" You almost laugh. "It is very quiet," you whisper. "That is what frightens me." When you leave the chapel, the corridors smell of incense and rain. A messenger waits at the door, his cloak damp, his face pale. He bows, holding out a sealed letter. The wax bears a mark you recognize, not of the crown, but of your son, Henri, the absent heir. You break the seal as you walk, scanning the words in the light of a single torch. The king weakens. The nobles circle. Trust no one wearing a cross who does not fear your silence. You fold the letter, your heart beats steady. Henri has learned well. The lesson of Florence that piety and poison are both instruments of survival runs in the family. By dusk, another message arrives, this one from the royal physician. He speaks in whispers of a tonic for the king's nerves, a powder to still his trembling, a draught to ease his sleep. You listen carefully, watching his hands. "Too much," he says, "and it could stop the heart entirely." You nod, as if considering. "I will measure it myself." His eyes widen, but he bows and leaves. In your chamber, you hold the vial to the light. It glows faintly amber, catching the flame's reflection like liquid guilt. You think of the priest's words, "Memory is your penance." You pour 2 drops into a glass of wine, no more. Enough for calm, not for death. Still, you hesitate. The power to take life sits easily in your hand. It is the choice not to use it that feels heavy. When you bring the wine to Charles's room, he is awake, murmuring prayers into the darkness. You offer the glass. He drinks without question. His eyes close, his breathing steadies. You watch him drift towards sleep, your hand resting over his heart, counting each beat until it finds a slower rhythm. As the candle burns down, you whisper into the silence, "Forgive me, Father, for what I have not done." Outside, thunder rolls across the sky, not a storm but a warning. In the chapel below, the priest extinguishes the last candle, and the scent of smoke rises through the stone like the ghost of confession itself. The gift arrives from Venice, wrapped in linen and tied with a silver thread. The seal bears no name, only a crest you remember from another life, a merchant house once loyal to the Medici. You open it slowly, your fingers tracing the cool curve of the object within. It is a mirror, round and perfect, the glass so clear it seems almost alive. When you tilt it, the candlelight scatters into 1,000 trembling stars. For a moment, it feels as though the night itself has been caught and tamed in your hands. The court delights in foreign gifts. They call them tokens of respect, though you know better. Every offering is a question. Do you trust us enough to touch what we send? You place the mirror on your desk, angled so that it reflects the door. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty has always been the most polite disguise for danger. That evening, when you hold court, you notice how the courtiers speak more carefully than usual. The mirror has become a presence in the room, a silent witness. When men speak lies, their eyes flit toward it. When they tell the truth, they avoid their reflection altogether. It amuses you. You need no sorcery to uncover deceit. Vanity does the work for you. Later, when the halls have emptied, you return alone. The fire burns low, painting your reflection in shades of gold and ash. You study the face that looks back at you, the lines around your mouth, the steadiness of your gaze. Florence gave you that steadiness, the unflinching way of seeing not what you wish to see, but what is. You think of all that glass has shown you, the triumphs, the regrets, the ghosts of your children's laughter, and wonder which image history will choose to keep. As you watch, a faint shimmer ripples across the surface, like breath fogging cold glass. You lean closer. For an instant, you think you see something else there, a woman's face, not your own. Pale, calm, smiling with an understanding that chills the blood. The fire snaps, the image vanishes, and you realize your pulse has quickened. You laugh quietly. Florentine imagination, you tell yourself? Or Venetian trickery? Still, unease lingers. You call for your apothecary, an old man with ink-stained fingers and a scholar's caution. He examines the mirror under lamplight, muttering in Latin. "The glass is pure," he says at last. "But the silver behind it, that is Venetian mercury. It can steal the breath if you stare too long. They say it shows not what is, but what is owed." You thank him and dismiss him. You do not tell him that you already know what you owe. That night, you wake before dawn. The air feels wrong, too still. You glance toward the mirror. Moonlight spills across its surface, and for a heartbeat, you think it's moving the light, deepening, swirling, like water stirred by an unseen hand. You rise, cross the room, and turn the glass face down on the table. When the servants come in the morning, the mirror is gone. Only the silver thread remains, curled like smoke. You tell no one. Some gifts, you decide, are not meant to be accepted, only survived. By spring, Paris blooms again, but the blossoms smell faintly of smoke. The court follows its rituals as though repetition could erase memory. You rise before dawn, dress in silks of deep blue and black, and take your seat in the council chamber long before the others arrive. It is here, in this gilded cage of etiquette and echo, that you perform your favorite role, not the grieving widow, not the pious mother, but the director of a theatre whose actors have no idea they are on stage. The courtiers arrive in a rustle of satin and murmurs, their eyes bright with calculation. They bow, they flatter, they watch one another watching you. You let them speak first. It is the oldest trick you know. Silence gives them space to reveal themselves. The nobles of Guise demand harsher control of the provinces. The royalists whisper of peace and marriage alliances. The clergy preach purification, always at the cost of someone else's blood. Each believes his words are original. You hear only the familiar chorus of greed wearing conviction as costume. When they finish, you smile the same calm, unreadable smile that has unnerved men since Florence. France, you say softly, is not a plaything for any one of us. Your voice carries easily through the vaulted chamber. It is a fragile stage upon which we must all pretend to agree until the audience believes us. They shift uneasily, unsure whether you jest. You continue before they can find courage. And since you all fancy yourselves actors, let us assign roles. The church may speak of virtue. The nobles may defend honor. The crown, and here your gaze settles on the young king at your side, will preserve peace. Together, we shall give the people the illusion of harmony. Illusion, my lords, is cheaper than war. The laughter that follows is brittle but obedient. They applaud your wit, though they understand your meaning well enough. France has become theatre, and you, its playwright. Later, in your private chamber, you read reports from across the kingdom. They arrive like scenes from a tragedy. Villages burned, loyalties shifting, banners rising and falling. You annotate them neatly, as though editing a script, choosing which stories will be told and which will be buried. Truth, you have learned, is not what happens, it is what survives documentation. As evening descends, the court assembles for entertainment. The musicians tune their lutes, the actors rehearse their lines, the scent of beeswax candles fills the air. You watch from your throne as the play begins, a farce about a wise queen who tames unruly nobles through wit. The audience laughs, some nervously, some sincerely. You sit unmoving, your eyes fixed on the actress wearing a crown too large for her head. When the curtain falls, the applause is thunderous. You rise and bow your head slightly, as if humbled by their devotion. But in your heart, you know this truth. France does not need a ruler. It needs a storyteller, someone who can make meaning out of chaos, who can turn blood into legend. That night, when the torches die and the corridors fall silent, you stand before your mirror and whisper to your reflection, let them believe the play. Let them never see the stage hands. The glass holds your image steady, pale, poised, unblinking. The theatre of power, you think, has only one rule: never leave the stage. Paris no longer knows where truth ends and performance begins. Every street hums with rumor, every gesture hides a script. You move through it all like a shadow wearing silk, your presence both feared and misunderstood. They call you La Reine de Fumée et de Miroirs, the queen of smoke and mirrors, half in awe, half in accusation. You do not correct them. A name like that is safer than the truth. Each morning begins with petitions. Courtiers kneel, soldiers plead, priests moralize. You listen, nod, and grant nothing outright. Promises, you've discovered, are more powerful unfulfilled. They tether men to you with expectation. In their eyes, you see the reflection of what they need you to be: mother, monarch, witch, savior, and you let each see what comforts him most. That is how one rules a kingdom poisoned by fear, not by decree, but by illusion. Your son, Henri, returns at last from his campaigns, crowned with victories and vanity. He enters the throne room to cheers and trumpets, his armor gleaming like sunlight made flesh. He kneels before you out of duty, kisses your hand out of habit, and rises already imagining you forgotten. "France is mine now," he says that evening over wine, his smile too practiced to be sincere. You answer only, "France has always belonged to whoever understands her best." He laughs, not realizing it was not a jest. The next day, his men parade through the streets, banners unfurled, coins tossed to the crowd. You watch from the window as the city cheers its new king, the noise rising like smoke from a burning field. Behind you, a servant coughs softly, awaiting your signal. "Let them have their spectacle," you murmur. The louder they celebrate, the less they'll hear the walls cracking. That night, you walk the palace halls alone. Mirrors line the corridor, gifts from Venice, Florence, and Prague. By candlelight, they multiply your reflection into a procession of women, each identical, each slightly distorted. You stop before one and study her face. "Is this who they see?" you whisper. The mirrored queen stares back, inscrutable. Perhaps she is more real than the one standing here. You've spent your life mastering invisibility, speaking in riddles, moving behind curtains, shaping the world without leaving fingerprints. Yet power, once held too long, begins to erase its wielder. The courtiers gossip that you have no soul left, only cunning. They are not entirely wrong. To survive among kings, you had to become something less mortal, a reflection of their desires, a consequence of their choices. When the clock strikes midnight, you return to your chambers. The fire has burned down to embers, glowing faintly like the city's heartbeat beyond your walls. You sit beside it, pouring yourself a final glass of wine. The surface trembles, catching your reflection for an instant before breaking it. You raise the glass in a silent toast to Florence, to France, to every secret that built your reign. "Smoke and mirrors," you whisper, smiling faintly. It was never deception. It was survival. The wind slips through the window and scatters the last of the flame, leaving only the scent of ashes and the certainty that illusion, once perfected, becomes indistinguishable from truth. The walls of the Louvre have begun to feel like a tomb. Outside, the kingdom holds its breath. France divided yet again, this time by the ambitions of her own sons. Inside, the corridors echo with footsteps that do not hurry, and servants who no longer speak above a whisper. The air tastes of dust and resignation. You have known war before, against enemies, against faith, but this new conflict is quieter and far more dangerous. It comes from within your own blood. Henri, now king, rules with the arrogance of certainty. He wears holiness like a costume, draping himself in ritual and penitence, convinced that suffering will purify his crown. He speaks of visions, of divine voices guiding him. You recognize the signs, not divinity, but delusion. Still, you listen when he speaks, your expression calm, your voice even. You have spent your life guiding kings through their madness. You will do it once more. The courtiers have changed their colors. Those who once bowed to you now bow to him, though you can see the unease in their eyes. They know that your silence is not surrender. In council, when Henri speaks of building a new holy order to purge sin from France, you ask softly, "And who decides what sin looks like?" The room freezes. Henri smiles, slow, dangerous. "God does," he says. "And God speaks through me." Afterward, in your chambers, you unlace your gown and stare into the mirror. You can still hear his voice, calm and fanatical. You whisper to your reflection, "He is no longer my son. He is a crown pretending to be flesh." You do not weep. You pour a small glass of wine and drink it like medicine. Your letters to the provinces go out under other names. You ask governors to remain loyal not to the king, but to France, the difference subtle enough to be ignored, powerful enough to be understood. You send word to allies still loyal to your memory, watch the court, guard the treasury, delay the zealots. You move pieces in silence, the way Florence taught you with precision, never haste. At night, sleep eludes you. You wander the palace halls by candlelight, hearing faint echoes of the past, Henri's laughter. As a boy, Charles's cries, Francois's prayers. The ghosts of your sons live here still, though only one breathes. You pause outside the chapel, where Henri kneels alone before the altar. His crown glints in the candlelight. His lips move in prayer, his eyes half open, distant. You wonder what God would answer such devotion, and what price he will demand. Returning to your chamber, you sit at your writing desk. The ink glows blue in the lamplight, the quill trembling slightly between your fingers. You begin a new letter, not to a noble, but to history itself. When a mother births kings, she also births wars. I have carried both. Outside, Paris sleeps beneath the weight of its own fear. Inside, the queen who built peace from blood now guards herself against her own creation. The siege is no longer on the city's walls, it is in your heart, in your family, in the silence that grows louder every night. You feel it before you hear it, that faint change in the air whenever you enter a room. Conversations falter, fans stop fluttering, and every eye glances just long enough to betray unease. You have lived in France for most of your life, yet even now they do not call you one of them. To the courtiers, you will always be l'Italien foreign, clever, dangerous. They forget that it was your cunning that kept their kingdom from collapse. Or perhaps they do not forget at all. Perhaps they simply fear that it might still be true. The French love their pageantry, their theatre of manners, their polite cruelties delivered with perfume and poetry. You understand this language better than any of them. Florence was born speaking it. When they gossip, you smile. When they plot, you provide the stage. You have learned that exile does not always mean distance. Sometimes it is the quiet alienation that walks beside you in every corridor. Henri grows more devout, more erratic. He dresses in black, fasting between feasts, confessing sins, even when he cannot name them. You watch his court shift around him like weather factions forming, collapsing, reforming. The Guise family whispers to Rome, the Protestants whisper to England, and you, the foreign mother, are accused of whispering to the devil himself. You write letters to Florence to remind yourself of your origin, of clarity, of logic. The responses are warm but cautious cousins who prefer your distance to your presence. One afternoon during a council meeting, a bishop remarks too boldly that France's troubles began when we let Italy into our hearts. The laughter that follows is brittle. You look at him until the sound dies. Then, very gently, you say, "Italy gave you the Renaissance, Monseigneur. You have given it debt and superstition. Shall we call the exchange even?" The bishop reddens, and the courtiers murmur, half shocked, half thrilled. Henri pretends not to hear. In the evenings, you dine alone. The table is set for company, though none arrives. You read dispatches by candlelight, your fingers tracing the ink, your eyes moving faster than thought. Outside, the rain falls steadily against the windows, washing away the sound of music from the great hall where your son entertains his favorites. You once filled those rooms with strategy and order, now they echo with laughter that feels like betrayal. A servant brings a letter sealed in black wax. It is from Florence, not family this time, but the city itself, written by a man you once trusted with your secrets. The message is short. The tide in France turns against you. Be careful whom you feed, for hunger makes men forget who serves and who eats. You fold it carefully and burn it. The ashes scatter across your desk like grey snow. You rise, cross to the window, and stare out over the city. The spires of Paris shimmer through the rain. Somewhere beneath them, people curse your name, pray for your soul, and tell stories of the foreign queen who poisoned her kings. You smile faintly. Let them. Florence taught you long ago that foreigners are never truly exiled, they are only misunderstood prophets. The candle burns low, the flame stretching thin before dying. You sit in the darkness, perfectly still, listening to the sound of France breathing beyond the glass, uneasy, feverish, and still yours. The palace glows like an ember. Gold and laughter spill from every window, masking the decay underneath. It is the king's idea, a grand feast to silence the whispers of rebellion, to remind France that its monarch still commands joy. You allow it, you even plan it. If the court must crumble, better that it does so under chandeliers. The great hall shimmers with excess. Platters of venison gleam beside towers of sugared fruit. Goblets overflow with burgundy, and musicians play so loudly that no one can hear the truth gnawing at their feet. You sit at the high table, your gown a deep garnet that catches every flicker of light. Beside you, Henri laughs too loudly, his smile brittle, his eyes shadowed by sleepless devotion. The courtiers praise his piety while drowning themselves in wine. You watch them and think, this is not a feast, it is a requiem with better lighting. When the toasts begin, the air thickens with deceit. The Duke of Guise raises his cup to the purity of France, a phrase that drips with accusation. The Huguenot ambassador clinks his glass with a forced smile. Henri says nothing, his fingers tracing the edge of his goblet as though it were a blade. You can feel the tension in the room tighten like wire. You lean toward him, whispering, "Smile, my son. The kingdom is watching." He obeys, but the smile never reaches his eyes. You eat little. Food tastes strange when one is surrounded by ghosts. The faces blur before you, nobles who conspired against you years ago, generals who swore loyalty and sold it twice, women who once whispered in your ear and now whisper against your name. Every laugh sounds rehearsed, every compliment hollow, and yet for a moment you are almost grateful. Hypocrisy is the closest thing to peace a court can afford. When dessert arrives, you notice the candles burning low. Their wax drips in long, steady lines, like time itself melting. Henri rises, goblet in hand. "Tonight," he declares, "we celebrate unity." His voice wavers, then hardens. "Let those who love France drink with me, and those who do not choke on their deceit." The hall freezes. You stand quickly, laying a hand on his arm. "Enough." He looks at you, mother, mirror, adversary, and lowers his cup. The musicians resume, and the moment passes, but you feel the fracture deepen. Later, when the feast ends, the courtiers spill into the corridors like drunk ghosts. You remain behind. The servants clear the tables, their movements careful, reverent. You pick up Henri's goblet and turn it in your hand. A single drop of wine clings to the rim, dark as blood. You wipe it away with your sleeve. Outside, the wind rises, carrying the smell of rain or perhaps of something older, more final. You walk alone through the hall, the echo of your footsteps mingling with the faint music still drifting from the courtyard. For years, you fought to build peace through order, faith through fear, loyalty through survival. Now, as the last candle sputters out, you understand, no kingdom is ever saved. It is only postponed. You leave the empty hall, your shadows stretching long behind you, and whisper to the silence, "Let them feast. Tomorrow they will remember who fed them." The palace feels cavernous now, stripped of laughter, heavy with incense and the slow creak of morning. The tapestries hang motionless. Even the air refuses to move. You walk the length of the gallery, your footsteps echoing off the marble, your reflection slipping from mirror to mirror, like a ghost too disciplined to vanish. Henri sits at the far end, the sunlight falling through the stained glass in shards of blue and gold, painting his face like a saint's, though the saints you remember were never so brittle. He has grown thin, his eyes hollow. The crown he wears seems too heavy for his head, yet he will not remove it. "France weeps," he says when you approach, though he is speaking to himself, not to you. "I have given her everything, yet she bears me no heir." His voice cracks on the last word. You pause, measuring your tone before you speak. "God tests kings as he tests prophets," you say softly. "The absence of an heir is not punishment, only delay." He turns to you then, and you see the fever beneath his calm, that same restlessness that haunted his brother before the end. "Delay?" he whispers. "No, mother, it is judgment." He clutches his rosary so tightly the beads dig into his flesh. "France has sinned. I must cleanse it. I must." You cut him off with a look, a single practiced glance that stills him like a hand on a serpent. "You must rest," you say. "The kingdom cannot survive another crusade against its own blood." He laughs, a sound too sharp for the quiet room. You sound afraid. You meet his gaze evenly. I am, you reply, but not of you. I fear what will happen when you are gone. Outside, the courtiers whisper their panic. France has begun to fracture again, nobles plotting inheritance, Rome murmuring of excommunication, England watching with predatory patience. You hear it all, as you always have, and you know that once Henri dies, there will be no clear successor. The Valois line will end, and with it, the house you have spent your life defending. That night, you find him in the chapel, kneeling before the altar, the light of a single candle trembling beside him. "Pray with me," he says without turning. You kneel, though you have long ceased to believe that prayer changes anything. He whispers to the Virgin, to the saints, to a God who answers through silence. When his voice falters, you continue the prayer for him, your words smooth, unwavering, automatic. Later, you help him rise. His fingers, once strong, now cling to your arm like a child's. For a moment, you see him as he was the boy with ink-stained fingers and too many questions, terrified of thunder, desperate to please you. He presses your hand to his lips. "If I die," he murmurs, "promise me France will not forget me." You do not promise. You cannot. History forgets kings more easily than mothers. You simply touch his cheek, memorizing the warmth that still lingers there, and whisper, "Sleep, my son. The crown will remember you, even if the world does not." When you leave, the candle still burns beside the altar, its flame bending under the weight of its own smoke like a dynasty in its final hour, too proud to admit it is already fading. The Louvre has grown quieter with every funeral. The tapestries hang like mourning veils, and the portraits of dead kings watch you with the weary patience of those long accustomed to disappointment. Courtiers still walk the corridors, but their steps are cautious, their laughter hollow. You have outlived almost everyone who once called you enemy, and far too many who called you son. At dusk, the palace becomes a labyrinth of echoes. You know its every turn, every creak of floorboard, every hidden passage once used for escape or for listening. You built this place as a fortress for power. Now it feels like a mausoleum for memory. When you pass the mirrored gallery, your reflection startles you, a face pale and fine as porcelain, framed by black silk. You stop and stare for a moment, realizing that the woman staring back is not the girl Florence sent to France, nor the queen who ruled its storms. She is something in between, the residue of both. You take your supper alone, as you have for years. The servants set the table with mechanical grace, silver gleaming, goblet filled, candles lit. You eat little. Hunger has become an echo of another life. The taste of wine, once a comfort, now turns bitter on your tongue. The hall beyond your chamber is empty, save for guards who whisper prayers under their breath. Even they are superstitious of you now. Outside, Paris murmurs beneath a low fog. Bells toll distantly, though you no longer remember which church they belong to. The rhythm of the city has become the rhythm of your breath, slower, shallower, less certain. You rise and cross to the window, the air cool against your face. From here you can see the faint glow of torchlight on the river, the slow movement of barges. The same water that once carried the bodies of the slain now carries grain and wine and rumor. France endures. France always endures. A servant announces a visitor, one of your ladies, grown grey at the temples, who has served you since the days of Henri's birth. She brings a letter sealed in black. You take it, recognizing the handwriting before she speaks. It is from the king himself, written in trembling lines. "I am unwell, mother, pray for me. I fear God's patience wears thin." You trace the ink with your finger, feeling the weight of a history written in blood and consequence. Later, when you dismiss her, you linger by the dying fire. Shadows leap across the walls, twisting into familiar shapes, a child laughing, a young bride trembling, a widow in black giving orders to men who could never understand her. The flames fade, leaving only the faintest glow, the color of dying embers. You whisper into the stillness, unsure if it's a prayer or a farewell. Everything I built was meant to last. Everything I loved learned to leave. The words hang in the air, unanswered. Outside, the wind rises, brushing against the shutters like a hand that remembers your name. The palace breathes once more, softly, as though it too knows that even stone must one day learn how to let go. The corridors of the palace smell faintly of myrrh and decay. Somewhere behind the chapel walls, the apothecary has set up his table glass vials clinking, mortars grinding, herbs drying in bundles that hang like sleeping bats. You visit him in the evenings now, when the courtiers have retired and the candles burn low. He does not bow anymore. There is no need. He knows why you come. The room is small, its windows shuttered. He works by lamplight, hands steady despite his years. On the table before him sits an array of tonics and tinctures, their colors soft and sinister, honey gold, ash gray, pale blue. He gestures toward them, naming their purposes, one to ease the lungs, another to dull the ache of bones, another to calm the mind. But your gaze lingers on a fourth bottle, nearly invisible against the wall, a liquid so clear it reflects the flame perfectly. You don't ask what I seek, you say. He does not look up. I learned long ago that asking only gives the answer power. You take the vial, turning it slowly between your fingers. It catches the lamplight like a shard of time itself. How quick is it? You ask. Mercifully so, he replies. Then, after a pause, if used with courage, you nod, placing the vial back on the table. Then, I shall leave it here. Mercy, like courage, should not be wasted. He watches you as you leave, his expression unreadable. He knows what all apothecaries know, that the difference between medicine and poison lies only in intention. Back in your chambers, you find the mirror once again. You have moved it from the gallery to your desk, the same Venetian glass that once haunted your nights. It reflects the candle beside it, the soft tremor of light playing across your face. You study the woman within, skin pale as parchment, eyes dark as ink. You remember when those eyes commanded armies, silenced bishops, raised kings. Now they only stare back, patient, waiting for the body to admit what the soul already knows. You unstopper a different bottle, a tonic for sleep, the apothecary's mildest. The scent of chamomile and mint rises, sweet and thin. You sip it slowly, feeling the warmth spread through your chest. Beyond the walls, the city murmurs. Hooves clatter faintly across the bridge. A song drifts from a tavern far below. Paris lives. The sound comforts you. The living always do. On your writing desk lies an unfinished letter, its edges curling toward the candle. It begins as all your letters do, to whomever inherits what remains. You dip your pen once more, the ink catching the lamplight like a bruise. I have spent my life balancing mercy against necessity, you write. Perhaps history will learn to tell the difference. You seal the letter with wax and set it aside. The flame gutters low. You think of the clear vial waiting in the apothecary's dark room, and you smile faintly. Some choices, you decide, are more powerful left unmade. The candle dies, and with it the reflection in the glass. In the darkness that follows, the queen breathes, slow, deliberate, unafraid, surrounded by the quiet hum of her own unfinished alchemy. The bells toll again, though this time they ring not for victory or ceremony, but for extinction. You hear them from your bed, slow, deliberate, each note echoing through the stone walls like a verdict. Henri is dead. Your last son, your last king. The Valois line, centuries old, ends not with the roar of war, but with the sigh of illness and the soft murmur of priests. The house you built your life to protect has fallen in silence. The courtiers tread carefully now, their mourning rehearsed, their loyalty already shifting like smoke. You see it in their eyes when they enter your chamber, pity mixed with calculation. They bow, they speak of comfort, they call you majesté out of habit, but the word has already lost its weight. You are no longer the mother of a king, you are the relic of a vanished dynasty. A messenger arrives from Rome with condolences wrapped in diplomacy. Another comes from Navarre, bearing polite promises from the new heir to the throne. Henri of Bourbon. You read his letter twice. It is written with grace, humility, and the quiet assurance of a man who knows that mercy can be more dangerous than conquest. "I will restore France," he writes. "You may rest now, madame." You fold the letter carefully and set it beside the others. Rest, you think. The word feels foreign on your tongue. That night, you walk the corridors one final time. The air is thick with candles, smoke, and history. You pass the hall of portraits, where generations of Valois gaze down at you, some stern, some sorrowful, all trapped in their painted certainty. You pause before Henri's likeness. The artist captured his youth, his sharp jaw, his arrogance polished into elegance. He looks alive enough to speak. "You always believed you were chosen," you whisper. Perhaps you were, just not for mercy. The city outside is restless, whispering of change. The streets hum with the name of the new king, Henri IV. A Protestant once, now a Catholic by convenience, his rule will heal what your son's wars tore apart. The irony is not lost on you. You spent a lifetime balancing faith and survival, only to see both surrendered to pragmatism. In your chamber, you sit by the window as dawn begins to bleed across the horizon. The sky over Paris turns the color of old gold, the same shade as the tapestries that hang limp along the walls. A servant brings water and a prayer. You wave him away. You prefer the company of silence. You look down at your hands, thin, lined, unsteady. These hands once crowned kings, signed treaties, fed armies. They tremble now only from age, not fear. You fold them together, almost in prayer, though the words that rise are not sacred but practical. "Let them build what they must," you murmur, "but let them remember who kept the stones standing long enough to do so." The bells toll again, softer this time, as if the city itself mourns what it no longer understands. You close your eyes, listening to the sound fade through the streets. The house of Valois has fallen, but its ghost still walks dressed in black silk, with Florence in her bones and France in her hands. The day after Henri's death, they bring you the mourning cloth. Black velvet, heavy as sin, smelling faintly of myrrh and dust. You do not wait for ceremony. You lift it yourself, the fabric cool against your cheek, and drape it over your head. The world dims to a soft blur, candlelight turned to shadow, color turned to memory. It feels like stepping into silence. You rise slowly. The servants keep their distance, even grief has become an extension of authority. The palace is quiet but not still, footsteps echo, doors creak, whispers dart between rooms like frightened birds. The Bourbon envoys have arrived already. They come not to comfort but to negotiate. France, it seems, wastes no time in turning mourning into diplomacy. In the council chamber, the air smells of wax and wilted flowers. The men seated before you are strangers, their accents southern, their loyalty uncertain. They bow too deeply, their respect rehearsed. His Majesty, Henri of Navarre, one begins, wishes to assure your Majesty that the Valois legacy will endure under his rule. You incline your head, your voice a thread of calm. Legacies do not endure under other men's names, they fade. The envoy blinks, uncertain if he has been insulted. You let him wonder. When the meeting ends, you retreat to your chambers. The corridors seem longer than before, the light thinner. You pass a mirror and catch your reflection, a wraith in silk and shadow. The black veil softens your features, erases the years, erases the woman entirely. Perhaps that is why it comforts you. Behind the veil, you are untouchable, invisible, eternal. You spend your evenings by the fire now, the same way you did in Florence as a girl, hands folded, eyes fixed on the flame. The apothecary visits with his tonics, murmuring about rest. You dismiss him. Sleep is no longer an ally. When you close your eyes, the faces come. Your sons, your husbands, your enemies, your allies, all tangled together in one long procession of consequence. They do not accuse you. They do not forgive you. They simply stare. Outside, the people chant the name of the new king. Henri of Navarre rides through the streets promising bread and peace. The bells ring for him now, those same bells that once tolled for your coronations, your wars, your grief. Their sound reaches even here, muffled through the veil. You listen without resentment. Power has always been borrowed. You merely held it longer than most. As dawn breaks, the servant opens the shutters. Light pours into the room, striking the veil so that it glows faintly, like smoke caught in gold. You rise and walk to the window. Paris gleams below, rebuilt, reborn, indifferent. You rest your hand on the glass and whisper, "It was never France that betrayed me. It was time." The bells ring again, closer this time. You close your eyes beneath the black veil and let the sound wash over you. For the first time in decades, you feel weightless, neither queen nor sinner, neither mother nor monarch, only the last echo of a dynasty learning how to vanish. It begins as all endings do, with the sound of quills and the faint scratch of parchment. You sit at your desk by the window, wrapped in your veil, the winter light spilling cold across the room. The city outside hums faintly through the glass, wheels over cobblestones, the cry of vendors, a distant bell that tolls without meaning. You have spent your life surrounded by sound. Now you crave only quiet. The paper before you is thick and pale, the ink dark as blood. You dip the quill, hesitating only once before the first stroke. The words come slower than they used to, the hand that once signed treaties and death warrants now trembling with age. You write to Henri of Navarre, now Henry IV, King of France, son not of your blood but of your consequence. To His Majesty, the King of France. You begin, the formality steadying you. You inherit a nation scarred but breathing. That is more than most monarchs receive. I send you neither blessing nor counsel, for both are wasted upon kings. Only this, remember that mercy is not the opposite of power, it is its disguise. You pause, the ink glistening before it dries. Then you continue, more softly now, as though confessing to the page itself. I have buried 3 sons and a kingdom. I have worn crowns that turned to thorns and prayed to gods who answered in silence. Yet I do not regret what was done. A mother does not regret the pain of birth, even when the child she bears becomes the ruin of her name. The quill scratches again. The final lines come like a whisper. France will forget me. It should. But should it remember, let it not call me cruel. Let it say only that I kept the lamp burning when every other hand trembled. That, I think, is enough. You lay the quill aside, the ink stains your fingertips, dark crescents against your pale skin, the mark of a lifetime spent writing the future in other people's blood. You fold the letter carefully, pressing the seal with your signet ring. The wax cools quickly, sealing not only your words, but the last remnant of your authority. A servant enters, bowing low. "Shall I send it at once, madame?" You nod. "Yes. Before I change my mind." He takes the letter and vanishes, his footsteps fading into the long corridor like time itself. You rise and move toward the hearth. The fire burns low, its glow softer than usual, almost kind. On the mantel rests a single candle, the last one of the night. You light it, watching the flame catch, the wax begin to melt. For a moment the reflection in the window seems younger, the girl from Florence, the bride from Rome, the widow who ruled through ruin. You whisper to her, to all your ghosts, "I have done enough." Outside, the bells of Notre Dame toll. Deep and slow, you stand perfectly still, listening until the last note fades into silence. Then you extinguish the candle with your breath, leaving only the smoke thin, grey, and rising a final message that no one will read. The morning comes pale and still, as if the sky itself holds its breath. Your servants move softly through the corridors, careful not to wake you, though you have not slept. You sit in the chair by the window, your body draped in black silk, your hands resting on the armrests as though carved there. The fire has gone out, leaving only the faint scent of ash and roses, the perfume they use to hide the smell of endings. Paris wakes below, unaware. The marketplace stirs to life, the bells ring, and carts creak across the bridges. The people speak of the new king, of bread, of gossip, of spring. Few remember that the woman who once ruled them still lives in the upper rooms of the Louvre, watching the world she shaped move on without her. You do not resent them, you envy them, their forgetfulness. Your physician enters with a bow, a small vial trembling in his hand. "Your Majesty must eat," he says gently, his eyes refusing to meet yours. You shake your head. "Not today." You gesture for him to leave it on the table. When he hesitates, you add, "Even queens are allowed their silence." He bows again and retreats, closing the door behind him. The sound of the latch feels final. You turn your gaze back to the window. The sky is streaked with silver and the faintest trace of gold. Somewhere beyond it lies Florence, the city of your childhood, of gardens and fountains and laughter unburdened by crowns. You imagine its air warm against your face, its language rolling like a lullaby you have not heard in years. You realize that you have carried two countries in your heart all your life, one that gave you birth and one that took everything after. The clock chimes softly. Noon. You rise, slower than before, and cross the room to the writing desk. The candle from last night still stands there, half-burned, its wax hardened in ripples like frozen time. Beside it lies your rosary. You pick it up, the beads cool between your fingers, smooth from decades of use. You murmur a prayer, not for salvation, but for rest. Your breath grows shallow, but your mind is clear. You think of your sons, Francois, Charles, Henri, their laughter, their crowns, their ruin. You think of the lovers who feared you, the enemies who respected you, the poets who cursed your name while quoting your wit. You think of France still bleeding, still beautiful, still worth the cost. When the maid enters hours later, she finds you as if asleep, the veil still resting over your shoulders, your face calm, your hand loosely curled around the rosary. The window is open, the curtains breathe with the wind. Outside, the bells of Paris toll once more, this time softer, almost tender. The quiet queen has finally fallen silent. But in the city below, in the whispers of history and the echo of her deeds, Catherine de Medici still moves unseen, unfaded, a shadow stitched into the fabric of France itself.